message is simple. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law. And it is my responsibility and my duty and my job to enforce it. The law is both powerful and fragile. And today in court, we will prove our case. I thank you all for being here. And again, justice will prevail. Thank you.
Just say this to Big Tish James, the New York Attorney General. I dare you. I dare you to try to continue your lawfare against President Trump in his second term. Because listen here, sweetheart, we're not messing around this time. And we will put your fat ass in prison for conspiracy against rights. And I promise you that. So think long and hard before you want to violate President Trump's constitutional rights or any other American's constitutional rights. It's not going to happen again.
We need to get to this breaking news out of the White House with Kristen Holmes. Kristen, I understand we have some legal breaking news.
Yeah, we have just learned that New York Attorney General Letitia James, who obviously brought the charges and won against President Donald Trump, has just been indicted by the Department of Justice. This was a case that President Trump wanted to be brought. It's a mortgage fraud case.
Okay. So, I don't know. Most people know by now that, Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, brought a case against Trump for mortgage fraud where she basically said he lied on a loan application and overvalued properties so that he could get more favorable loans. All of that was recouped. It was, I think, years old at that point. And she basically found something that she could bring before a court. I think her and Alvin Bragg, the DA, and then some judge, they all deemed that, Trump did violate this loan or committed mortgage, or not mortgage fraud, but I guess loan fraud. And from there, obviously they went to a trial. She introduced her facts. And then, in that case, the jury did find him guilty and said that he, did in fact owe all this money. And, she obviously did run on, for her whole campaign was her running to go after Trump and sue him. She was like, he's going to know my name. We're going to make him famous or something like that. I forgot how she worded it. But anyways, she did in fact win that trial. Of course, he appealed it. And then he, I think there's still more appeals that need to be done, but he did win the one where it took all the money, where he doesn't have to pay that 300 million or whatever the case was. So that's all done. That part it has been thrown out. And so now it's just kind of trivial stuff where, I assume he'll appeal whatever he's got left to appeal will be, it's not as harsh, and I guess he'll work that out in his own time or whatever. But now, she's been indicted. And so for mortgage fraud. And there's a lot of, obviously a lot of this is still alleged, but, from the documentation and all that, she did check the box that this was going to be one of her primary residences. And, she did do this when she was Attorney General of New York. And so that's kind of the main issue here is like, well, you live in New York, that is your primary residence. But she, put on some sort of documentation that this was an investment property. So basically it was going to be something that she rented out to make money off of. There's been a lot of talk of how the amount that she supposedly or allegedly frauded was very trivial. It was like $19,000. And so it's not that much, right? My only question to that is, if it's not that much, then why'd you do it in the first place? Because that's a lot of what's been said so far that I've seen. It's been one way that the media, at least for those that are on her side, have been defending her and coming and saying, well, we're talking about a very trivial amount of money. Well, if it was trivial, why do it in the first place? You have a good job. You're a famous person. You have a good standing. Like Tish James is never really going to have to worry about money. She should always have a decent life. Like you didn't have to resort to criminality. You didn't have to resort to any of that. Allegedly, if that's what the jury finds. The grand jury is what this was presented to, who has decided that there's enough evidence here to go ahead and indict her. And all an indictment is just that she's being charged, right? It doesn't mean that she's guilty or anything like that, at least not yet anyway. But she did check a box that said, this is a primary residence when it wasn't. I also have heard some talks about how, oh, well, she noticed this error later on her own and sent an email, but never heard anything back, something along those lines. And, well, is that really... It's like, oh, okay, well, they didn't say anything back, so it must not be that big a deal. I don't really know what what that defense entails. It just kind of seems like one of those things. And there's probably some documentation that she's going to have on her side with her legal representation, who's going to present that. Well, look, she did email the mortgage company, didn't do anything. They obviously didn't think it was that big of a deal. She got a more favorable loan, but we're really talking about $19,000. It's a nothing burger when it comes to money. And I would agree with that. It probably is just nothing. It's a trivial amount of money. This is about reputation damage, though. I think that this is about character assassination is what I think it is. Whether Trump is behind this completely, whether he's at the forefront of this indictment, or if he's just like, yeah, go ahead, do what you got to do. I in no way care about Tish James. I mean, obviously I don't ever have to really deal with someone like this, but this is absolutely hysterical to me. And that's kind of mainly what my channel is just to kind of point out the comedy in which resides in politics. This to me is just hilarious that, she did all this talking and all this, basically chest beating. She's had these different, I don't know if they're press conferences or panels or whatever that she's done where she is like screaming into a microphone at a crowd like a revolutionary. And it is just comedy. This Tish James is another one of those ones I hope never goes away because, or at least I hope that she's around for a long time, because they're so vapid and aloof as to what the world around them really is. They live in this bubble and this mindset, and they're mad and just drunk on this power that really is, well, in her case, she does have some, but they're mad with this power that just makes them utterly delusional. That it's like, this is another one that just doesn't fully understand that she really isn't, her existence and her job and the way she looks at things is meaningless. But she thinks she's far more than what she actually is. I know Attorney General is a big position. I'm not trying to downplay what her position is. Obviously, she had the power to bring Trump to court and win a conviction in that case. But her mindset and who she is overall, especially when she says no one is above the law, and then here she is now being on, the wrong end of the law. But we will see. We will see. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and play some videos here. So we'll get started with that.
This is nothing more than a continuation of the president's desperate weaponization of our justice system. He is forcing federal law enforcement agencies to do his bidding, all because I did my job as the New York State Attorney General. These charges are baseless, and the president's own public statements make clear that his only goal is political retribution at any cost.
Hang on, I'm sorry to interrupt you. New York Attorney General Letitia James has been indicted. Andrew Weissman, your reaction?
I think that I want to sort of address the people who might look at this and say this is sort of tit for tat, that you see that in the Democratic administration, you see them going after Republicans, and this is Republicans going after Democrats. This is where, one, even if two wrongs don't make a right, even if that were true, but this is where facts matter. In the Letitia James case that she brought in New York, there was a trial. Facts were adduced. We all could look at those facts, and Donald Trump had a chance, an opportunity to have due process and to hear all of that. Here, the process by which this has been undertaken, like the process that was undertaken with respect to James Comey, tells you that career people and even Trump-appointed people did not think that there was evidence. There were not facts that justified this. And I think a perfect symbol of the fact that this is different, that what we're seeing is different. It is not normal. It is not everyone does it. And to me, when people say it's tit for tat, it's like, no, in prior administrations, and by the way, Republican and Democratic administrations under normal times, which I agree with Mark are gone, under normal times in those administrations, there is no politics that is supposed to be considered. I'm not saying it's never considered and there aren't those aberrations.
No,
that's not how you're built.
Right.
Yeah. A few minutes ago, we confirmed that she was indicted by a grand jury in Alexandria of at least one count of bank fraud, Nicole, and the return was rather speedy. 4 o'clock was when the grand jury was supposed to come back out and present their information to Halligan. There was a 4-person in the courtroom along with Halligan, and they released their decision. I will tell you there's one other really interesting element to this that I'm hearing from sources, which is that this grand jury made its decision and listened to the presentation on its very first day in the box. In other words, grand juries sit sometimes for weeks and weeks. This grand jury was impaneled today, and this was their first case and their first decision.
So that right there is pretty crazy. They did it all on day one. So there's obviously something there, right? It's clear that what she did was commit mortgage fraud. Whether they're going to make an example of this woman and put her in prison, I don't know. I don't see that. Maybe they will. I don't see that happening. I think at the most she might step down as Attorney General. Maybe. I think that to me would be the most extreme, and obviously pay some kind of a fine. Which I'm sure she would appeal, but that's kind of the most that I would see happening. But that is pretty damning to know that the grand jury that was, viewing in this case, decided like within day one that, go ahead and, proceed with the trial and present facts. So she's going to have her day in court. So she'll get the opportunity to defend herself, obviously, and I guess we'll see what happens from there. But I'm going to go ahead and play some more of just kind of the media coping, and this is just great.
Aside for a second, what Tish James, and again, we're still getting the details, but if it's related to this mortgage issue, I mean, this is something that everyone in America, or many people at least, if you're lucky enough to be able to buy a house in America, you deal with this, right? The federal government doesn't go after all of these people for doing this.
According to PolitiFact, the day after she was elected in 2018, Letitia James was asked by a community activist if she was going to sue President Trump, and she replied, quote, "Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the ass. He's going to know my name personally." I mean, that's not a great look for somebody who has just been elected or just been campaigning, who hasn't even looked, I guess, at deeply at any evidence.
Well, we live in a system where attorneys general and district attorneys it's a bizarre case in many respects. First of all, it's incredibly small potatoes. This is a house that was purchased for $137,000 in 2020, a year when the average house in America was sold for $383,000. So any mortgage, any insurance on a house of that value is going to be very small, and in ordinary circumstances wouldn't draw the attention of the Department of Justice. But more importantly, what is so chilling about this case is that ever since Watergate, presidents have imposed on themselves the rule that they do not interfere in criminal prosecutions, much less demand them. But here you have a demanded prosecution, and one that the career people in the Eastern District of Virginia thought was an unworthy case. That's a really chilling example of how the criminal justice system is not supposed to work. Just because she made inappropriate comments, that doesn't mean she should get indicted for fraud years later. I mean, we're not supposed to live in a system of that kind of tit for tat. Criminal cases are supposed to stand or fall on their own.
Campaign trail, President Trump promised retribution for his political opponents. Is that what these charges are, or do you think that they have merit?
Well, we'll have to see if they have merit. That's up to a judge and jury to decide later on. What we do know is that these were certainly people who the president had chosen the defendant first before he knew what the crimes were. So usually in the Justice Department, you would find out what a crime is, then figure out who the defendant is. That's usually the general trajectory of criminal prosecutions. What's unusual about this situation is it feels like the president picked the defendants and then essentially ordered his Justice Department, find the crime, I've already chosen the defendants.
So the indictment accuses James of falsely claiming in loan documents that she would use a home she purchased in Virginia as a second residence. That allowed her then to get a better interest rate. Instead, they say she used this home as a rental property. Put this into context for us. How often would DOJ prosecute a case like this?
So bank fraud, or what we consider mortgage fraud type cases, are very common. They're, something that most U.S. attorneys' offices around the country do on a routine basis. What's different about this case is it is involving a very small amount of money, right? We're talking, almost $19,000. This is not the kind of case that most U.S. attorneys' offices are bringing. Usually they're looking for, mortgage schemes or things that involve a much higher monetary threshold. What jumps out at me is not the fact that it's a mortgage fraud case, but the amount.
She will get her day in court. It's funny there, just to kind of see how this has all been built up.
Side of the story. Aside for the first.
She'll tell her side of the story, obviously, which we all know what it is. We all know what happened. And, the other reports, it's funny how she went after Trump for all that. But that's not the only thing. Apparently there's one thing, and I know this is all alleged, so I have to preface that. But where, at some point she's some sort of document where it says her and her father were married. So I guess she could get a more favorable loan. And then there was, what was the other one? Oh yeah. Some other house that she had where she said it was I think a 4-bedroom when it was a 5. I'm paraphrasing. I could probably miss saying that. Anyway, you can look into all of that if you want. I've read a little bit up on it. I don't remember everything. This is just really of not that much interest to me. It's really just pointing out the hypocrisy of this woman. She's, again, a walking comedy show. That's what's funny to me. That's what's interesting to me, is just to see these ignorant politicians, these vapid, arrogant POSs that just come out here and act like they're, God's gift to the politics or the legal system. When the whole time, they have skeletons in their closet, or, accusing someone else when you're doing, basically the exact same thing. Yes, on a smaller scale because she's not at Trump's level, but still nonetheless, you're still doing it. So.
We are seeing Republicans argue that it was James who did political prosecutions. This from New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. James, quote, illegally weaponized her office to conduct a political witch hunt against Democrats, political opponents, most notably President Donald J. Trump. Again, that is a statement from Elise Stefanik. She goes on to call the charges specific and damning. What do you say to the argument, essentially, that James used her office for political revenge first?
That investigation was a multi-year investigation handled by career and seasoned lawyers and investigators in her office. It received in court, she was successful. The Trump organization and his family has a right to appeal it. What they cannot do is take the criminal justice system of this nation and say, because you sued me for something that courts have held me liable for, I'm going to indict you on bogus charges. And for Elise Stefanik and everyone else to defend this and say supposedly they're concerned about weaponization, but it's okay to have an indictment signed by one person who has never prosecuted a case, not a single career prosecutor would sign their name to it. I've indicted a lot of cases as Attorney General. I have never signed an indictment without any career prosecutors joining me, and nor would I.
Well, again, what was the point of a grand jury then? You know, if you're trying to say that you're not going to bring this case, you wouldn't indict, you wouldn't go for an indictment on this, you know, then what was the point of all that? The whole thing makes no sense. And then the coping is, you know, as you can see, it is what it is. There's people that hate Trump so bad that they will say and do anything to take him out. And I get it. Look, people hate presidents. I get it. The hypocrisy here, though, is what is on trial. I think ultimately that's just my take on it. This would be very interesting to see how this plays out. I don't expect a lot to come from this. You know, I do not think they are going to send her to prison. I think at the most it'll be a fine. Maybe she'll have to step down as Attorney General, or not, and it may just result in her not getting, I guess, reelected for the position. But nonetheless, I see this overall as just something that's comical. It's kind of funny to see how this plays out. But you know, anyway, that's my take. If you've watched the video or you like the video, hey, please give it a thumbs up. If you are watching this and you made it to the end, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Just trying to get a channel started talking about these kinds of things. So if you like it and you want to keep coming back, be sure to subscribe. Also, leave a comment what you think on Tish James and kind of what you think overall of this whole case, this whole situation. But that's going to do it for me, and I'll see you on the next one.